So today I wanted to talk about ADHD. I am really surprised that I haven't before because I am diagnosed with ADHD and I've also been taking medication for 6 or 7 years. So here we are. So ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, and it presents itself in three dominant ways. So we have the predominantly hyperactive and impulsive, which looks like somebody that is constantly on the go and they're always like seeking something that will stimulate them. They can't sit still and they have a problem with impulsivity. So this could be, saying impulsive things or kind of doing impulsive things. They're not able to really like sit and think about their action as easily. That can be a challenge. So they kind of just do it and then they're like, oh, maybe that wasn't the best thing to do. Then we have the predominantly inattentive. So this individual looks like maybe someone that daydreams a lot. For me, I can zone out for hours sometimes, and it almost feels like I'm not even in my body and I'm disassociating. And it's really difficult for me on those days to really focus on anything. Like it feels like what I really need on those days is just to zone out and be with my thoughts and not force my mind to focus on anything, which of course it's like, we can't do that if we have a job or we're going to school, but that's just what it feels like I need on those days. And the last presentation is the combined. So I was actually diagnosed with the combined presentation of ADHD, meaning that I have characteristics from both the hyperactive and inattentive. Yeah, and that's super fun because I'm all over the place. And I feel like when you have both, it's harder to understand for others. And it's even hard for yourself to understand because it seems inconsistent. Like some days I just am on the go all day and that seems to be really stimulating and that seems to be what I need and it motivates me. And then other days, like today, for example, I'm getting ready to go to the gym and I see a spot on my desk and I end up cleaning my desk for like 20 minutes. And then I have a new thought and I'm like, you know what? This is such a hallmark behavior of ADHD. I think I'm going to make a video about it. And here we are. So individuals that have ADHD have lower levels of dopamine. And dopamine is the feel-good hormone. It's responsible for pleasure, learning, satisfaction, and I want to also include motivation. So some examples of when we feel dopamine is when we eat something that's really tasty, or we win a game, or when you're having sex. Those are all examples of when you feel that neurotransmitter dopamine. So I mentioned earlier that I'm prescribed medication. I'm prescribed Adderall, which may be a familiar term to college students because a lot of college students that are not prescribed this medication take it to help them focus. And I do want to touch on the fact that it's actually very detrimental because people that don't have ADHD have the correct amount of dopamine going into their receptors. So it becomes really excessive and you end up depleting yourself of this dopamine when you are abusing Adderall. But I drew a diagram, my beautiful artwork. Bear with me. I will try to explain it as best as I can. I wanted to show with this diagram what's going on for individuals that have ADHD, especially when they take Adderall. So for individuals that have ADHD, their dopamine is kind of just floating around in their synapse. So this is a neuron. This is the receiving neuron to be specific. And this is a receptor. And we got all the cute little dopamines right here. So what Adderall does essentially is it helps push the dopamine into the receptors so the receiving neuron can receive it. So I wanted to talk about my own personal experience with ADHD because I feel like when you listen to an individual talk about their own experience, sometimes it's easier to understand compared to like reading about it online. So for me, I originally went to a psychiatrist because I was having a really hard time in college. I felt like I could read the same passage like 5 or 6 times and I couldn't retain anything that I was reading. And in my mind, I really felt like I was trying as hard as I could, and I just couldn't focus or retain anything that I had just read. And this felt like it was almost debilitating, and it really discouraged me to continue trying in school because it felt a lot more difficult and I felt a little bit at a disadvantage, and I wanted to see, what I could do to help. So I went to the psychiatrist. I told them a little bit about my childhood. When I was a lot younger, I was very, very impulsive, had a really hard time in class, and the only activities that I did really good in were like physical activities, because I feel like physical activities really stimulated me and they motivated me. And then I could actually focus on them. But day to day, what it's like living with ADHD, even though I take medication, I've had to do, I feel like, a lot of therapy, like behavioral therapy, and I've really had to identify a lot of patterns in order to really work on my ADHD, because medication alone, I don't think was, the fix. Like, yeah, medication is going to help, but you also have to kind of do the work and, learn new behaviors and identify where you might have some challenges and what could use some work. So yeah, day to day, I still struggle with making decisions. Like, if I don't sleep, my ADHD really flares up, and I've had insomnia for a long time. So there's actually a lot of days that I can't focus to the point where I can't make simple decisions. Like, I'll go to the restaurant and I'll have such a hard time making a decision on what to order that it actually starts giving me anxiety. And I do want to mention that anxiety and ADHD definitely have a high comorbidity rate, which means that they often come together. You're diagnosed with ADHD, and then you probably also have some anxiety in there as well. I also have a hard time communicating day to day. On the days that I don't sleep that well, which is often, as I've mentioned, I can't articulate my thoughts as well. And I really have a challenge listening to what an individual is saying as well, especially if it's like a really long story and I'm not able to engage with that person and like kind of stimulate my mind. I have a really hard time listening. And it's not that I don't care about that person or what they're saying, but it's just, a challenge that individuals with ADHD have. And on top of that, this challenge with communicating can also look like you're just jumping around topic to topic in a conversation. And I think those individuals that also have ADHD don't mind that structure, because they also are on that same wavelength. They're also like, that's what their mind is thinking. And it's really interesting because I'll be talking to one of my friends that has ADHD. I'll say something, I'll pause and be like, oh my God, look at how cute that dog is. And they're like, yeah, that's so cute. And then we'll go there for a second. And then we're like, okay, let's come back to what we were talking about. And it's really relieving to have that experience. For individuals that don't have ADHD, don't know where that accent came from, but for individuals that don't have ADHD, I can understand the frustration when you're just trying to have especially a serious conversation with somebody and they're kind of just like all over the place. So speaking of serious topics, I wanted to share a statistic. About 50% of individuals that are in substance abuse treatment also have ADHD. And this is something that I've seen in my personal experience, and I've also learned a lot about substance abuse and individuals that have really a lot of different types of mental disorders, but specifically ADHD, because those individuals with ADHD are seeking out stimulation because we feel like we don't have enough of it, or we feel like if we're not getting something, we don't really feel normal. So I can definitely understand why substance abuse is predominant amongst the ADHD population. And I want to share what's been helpful for me. I think that exercise is so, so important for individuals that have ADHD. I think that might be the only time that I truly feel super focused and like in the flow of things and just present. Well, I don't want to say only, but I often feel very focused after I work out as well. Another thing that really helps me a lot is meditating. I feel like meditation can be helpful, especially if you are typically inattentive. I feel like being able to sit with yourself and being present and just practicing that behavior can really train your mind to be like that all the time. And of course, your diet, always important. You know, you don't want to be using caffeine as a crutch. If you feel like you have ADHD, I think it's important to, go see a psychiatrist. And I'm not saying everyone has to take medication, but really utilize and learn about your different options. And another big one is really consistent sleep. When I don't sleep, I feel like I can't even function. And I know most people feel like that. And I'm definitely not saying my experience is more intense than others, but for me, if I don't sleep, like I can't focus on anything and I feel very just unmotivated. So really trying to be good about having like a consistent sleep pattern and cycle and routine. So as always, I want to motivate individuals to just become aware of, different types of mental illnesses and disorders. And I also want to emphasize that, if you feel like you're struggling with a mental disorder, like always seek help. Always, always. There is never anything shameful or wrong with seeking help. And it's really important, everyone's different. And some of us might have challenges or deficiencies, if you will, but that doesn't make you any less than anyone else. That just means that you might need some extra support or assistance. So I really advocate, going to a therapist if you feel like you need therapy, or going to your psychiatrist if you feel like medication will help, or, going to any kind of support group that might be helpful for you. Anyways, thank you guys for watching.